You just received your WinWing Ursa Minor and then connect it to your PC and then start up Flight Simulator and do expect that everything works. But as you can see, there's a challenge, because both the general controls and the airplane controls have no profile. Which means that none of these buttons on this nice joystick have been assigned. In this video we're gonna look at how you can set up the joystick so you can use it in Flight Simulator 2024. So how can you set up your joystick correctly? Well, the first thing of course you need to do is make sure that you see it in the WinWing view and make sure that the firmware is up to date. Keep in mind that this joystick has two firmwares, one for the base and one for the grip. Make sure that they are updated. The current version as the time of today, which is the 14th of February 2026, is version 1.00, which is, let's say, the version where you are. After you've done that, make sure that you calibrate all the axes and the sliders. That's just to ensure that the, I would say, calibration is done correctly. And then of course you can test it nicely using this test interface, right? You can press keys like this. You can see lights being up. And the nice thing is also that it shows the numbers here, which makes it easier to configure it in Flight Simulator. Because there are multiple ways to configure it. There's the manual way, but there's also the way to use a profile. Let's start with that last one, because that between brackets is the most easiest one. To do that, you need to go to WinWing and then go to the key binding. The key binding allows you to see all your devices, including your keyboard. But for now, we need to select the WinWing device. In the cloud, multiple people are sharing their configurations, including WinWing, which is now WinWing. This default, I'd say, kind of profile can be downloaded, and you can see I already downloaded because there's no download button behind it. And I also did it for the Phoenix 320 because you can see that some people created specific profiles for specific aircrafts, even including the Cessna, even including the test, and you can simply download them and then they will appear here. Based on this, you can run the profile, but before doing that, what you need to do is you need to create a profile first in Flight Simulator, because if I would do it now, it will say, hey, you need to close Flight Simulator. Even if I would close Flight Simulator, it likely doesn't work. The reason for that, there's no profile. There's no profile assigned for the general controls and the airplane controls. So let's first create those. We can click the gear and then say create. In this case, I'm gonna call it, let's say, what shall we do? I'll say GA for general aviation, and then GC for general controls. And then I press OK. Once I've done that, it will create a new profile. And if I go to assigned keys, I don't see anything that's been assigned, but that makes sense. And same thing I can do for the airplane's controls. So I can click on the gear, you can say create general aviation, and then AC for airplane controls, and I press OK. Now, if you want to create a specific profile, in this case for the A320 Neo V2, you can also create a profile for that, but it's not strictly necessary to do that, right? It really depends. If you, for example, want to have different key bindings for your A320 vs the Boeing 737. So once you've done this, you press save and go back. Sounds weird, right? I only created profiles, I didn't do anything. And now comes the power of this nice tool, because this tool allows you to push a configuration. So what I can do now is I can say run. This will go to Flight Simulator, and then it says, okay, hey, which, I would say, configuration do you want to push? I'm going to select GC, right, the general controls, and I will show you why. It says, okay, hey, do you want to activate a profile? Yes, it's activated successfully. Based on what I've figured out, you can only activate one profile at a time. However, what you could do is you can say this one, I apply it to the AC and then say confirm activation. But what you will see is that it then switches. So you can only have one profile active at a time. So let me activate this one, confirm the activation, press OK, and then let's start Flight Simulator again. But I don't want to bore you. So what I'm going to do is start Flight Simulator, and once we're in Flight Simulator, we will come back. So I did start at Flight Simulator, so let's go to the settings, because that's where you will find the controls which we were looking at earlier. Right, so let me try it again. Here we go, controls, and then we click the wing control Ursa Minor, and then we see the GC is still selected, right? The airplanes controls. This one is kind of lost. So that's also a warning for you. If you create some controls using the, I would say, wing control tool, it might wipe out certain, I would say, controls here. And that's also what I figured out. And I do still think it's a little bit weird. But let's see what the result is. The easiest way to do that is, of course, go to the activity. And in the activity, you can go to the assigned, because that shows us the assigned keys, or in this case, buttons. So what you see is that the wing sim or wing control, say profile, does a minimum set of controls. Actually, it doesn't even make sense to me, because it only sets the views, right? It only sets the views on how to use that, I would say, joystick on the top, right? The POV left, right, and up and down. And it sets some quick views, it resets the views, but it doesn't contain anything specific for the aircraft. This made me thinking about, okay, but what's now, right? What's the best option? Well, that's how I came up with that other profile. So let me quit Flight Simulator again and then load that other profile to show you the difference. So we're inside the wing control tool, right? SimAppPro. We click the joystick again to show, okay, hey, it's still connected. And let me show you. So what it did, right, is only configuring this nice joystick on the top and some of these buttons, right? Button number 20, which is this one, and some other buttons. But it didn't, I would say, configure any of the other buttons, or at least not all of them. For example, it didn't, say, configure the throttle. It didn't configure the, I would say, joystick itself, right? Where you can move the aircraft around. It didn't configure the Z-axis and the X-axis and the Y-axis. So let's see if that other profile works better. Keep in mind that the key binding part in this case is specifically for the Phoenix A320. So you might say, hey, I might want to, for example, download this one from Duncan Fear, because that one is specifically for the 172, or from Cat and Dog, because that also looks like to be for the 172. The other ones, it's, I'd say, hard to say, right? So people, if you're creating profiles, then at least provide a description, because this makes it pretty hard to decide which one to choose. For now, I'm gonna select the one from Journey Cloud, and then I'm gonna say, hey, I want to assign it to the AC. I'm gonna activate it. So let's see what happens now, right? Because I would say I am kind of, let's say, puzzled about how this works. So gonna close it, because you can see it still is not activated, right? So make sure that if you select run and confirm the activation, that it's active. But for some reason it doesn't activate. This also made me think about, okay, hey, but what's going on? Well, I didn't figure it out yet, what's going on, because you can still see, hey, it's downloading backup files. And that, I would say, might make sense, right? Because you might want to run the backup. But how can you resolve this, right? Because I want to simply run this one. The only way I came up with is sometimes tried multiple times. I do think it might have to do with a bug or something which is happening. Another way to resolve it is by really, I would say, closing the app. Well, after restarting the tool, it still didn't work. So I'm not sure what happened, but eventually I needed to re-log in, and after that I could press the login, right? So you can see that I can now easily switch between the profiles. You still see that old profile, that GAAC, is still there, which is, I would say, kind of, strange, right? Because it looks like that I would say it can't handle multiple profiles, which is, to be honest, weird. So some tips before, I would say, diving into Flight Simulator again. What I encountered, right, is sometimes that the devices are not shown up here. What you then need to do is simply let SimAppPro run, start Flight Simulator, and then as soon as you see that start button, you will see that devices will pop up here. That makes sure that the devices are, I would say, completely registered. And that's also what you see in these areas, right? In some cases you see, hey, it's not entirely green. It doesn't always mean that there is an issue. In this case, there is an issue because Flight Simulator isn't running. But make sure that you at least have the 3 green charts. Then go to the key binding and then try to bind it. Then it will likely say, hey, you tried to bind, but the game is still running. If it gives that error, then exit Flight Simulator and then set the configuration here in SimAppPro and then start Flight Simulator again. I would say there are still some buggy things. I'm not sure if it's wing controls issue or if it's a Sobos issue. I do think there's a combination of, because I do still think that it's a weird thing of creating your key bindings here and not in Flight Simulator. So what I'm going to do now is start Flight Simulator and then show you that other profile, that Phoenix one, because it has more options. So we're back in Flight Simulator. Let's go to the settings again and let's see what it did this time. So we go to controls, we select the Ursa controller, and now we see something has happened. First of all, right, we can see now it completely screwed up this configuration, but for some reason it created the airplane's controls. So it looks like that the tool is kind of limited of activating one of these profiles. So either you can use it to control the general controls, or you can use it to set the airplane's controls. But now let's see what has been activated. So we're going to go to assigned. And in this case, now you can see that it only assigned the set autopilot disengage and then the rudder axis. Well, that really helps. I would say not really. And I think you agree with me. But how can we fix this? Well, based on what I figured out and I did on testing, I do think that there's only one way to do this correctly, and that's by simply doing this. Hit the button and then hit delete, because this doesn't make any sense. So my recommendation is start from scratch, because as you can see, although it says here number 1, you can't even switch from controls. So let's create them from scratch. So we're going to say create. Then we're going to say here general aviation, general controls, and then wait. And then here we create a separate one, which is general aviation, airplane controls. But where should we start? Well, the easiest way is to move this one to, say, essential. Because the essential one shows you all the essential controllers which you need to configure. For example, you see the flaps over here, you see the toggle spoilers, you see the ailerons, the rudder axis, and multiple other ones. So my recommendation is to start with that, because if you start with this, you will, let's say, likely be pretty successful. And I would say pretty successful. I don't say that you're 100% successful, because there will be some challenges for you, 100%. But this is how I also did it. So let's start with the explanation of these options, right? We can see airplanes digital, we can see airplanes axis, then we see airplane analog. What is the difference? The airplane's digital is simply buttons, right? If you press it, then it does something. And same thing is for airplane analog. You can press it and it works mostly the same, right? The difference with this one, the airplane axis, that it really depends on an axis. And the WINWING Ursa controller has, let's say, 3 axes, right? It has the X, the Y, and the Z axis. The Z axis, if you move that stick, you can, say, turn it, and that's what they call the Z axis. So that's the first thing we're gonna assign, but of course you always need to look at where you want to assign what. So the easy way is to simply press it and then move it. As you can see, it now has set the joystick to L-axis Z, which I think is correct, but we're gonna try it out in an aircraft. So my recommendation here is also start with Flight Simulator. Start, for example, with a Cessna 172 parked on, I would say, parking spot. And then I'd say go to the controllers, because that's much easier. So let me also do that. So we're inside the cockpit of the Cessna 172, and the first thing we need to do is go outside. But how to do that without having that control configured? Well, there's one workaround, and that's by going to the toolbar, you click the camera, and then you can click on external. If you now move the joystick, right, twist it, you can see that the rudder works, because that's the thing we configured. But the rest is not working, right? If you move the joystick left or right or to the front or to move or pull it towards you, it doesn't work, so we need to do that. So let's go to the settings and let's continue configuration of the joystick. So again, click controls, then make sure that you click the joystick, and then we can do two things, right? We can either say essential ones, that's easy, but this gives us a long list. So what you can do is you can search for axes. If you search for axes, it gives you, say, the axes which are essential. But be aware, not all the axes are shown here. I will explain you in a few seconds. So in this case, we've got the other ones, right? We can say, okay, we move the joystick to the right. That will be L-axis X, and we move it to the front, which will be L-axis Y. So if we would now go back in Flight Simulator, we would see that those things are working. So let's test it. So I'm going to press escape, and again escape. And now if we move the joystick, you can see that we're having more controls, right? So we can use it. That's cool. But there's of course far more. Think about the flaps. Think about the parking brakes. Think about the brake itself. Well, that's also something which we need to configure. So let's go back to the settings menu again. Go to the controls, and inside the controls we can configure those essential things. So we're going to set it to essentials again, and then we can either do two things. We can search in this very long list, or we can search in the list by typing a part of the word. So toggle parking brakes. This means if you press the button, it will either release the parking brake or set the parking brake depending on the parking brake, let's say, situation where it is. So let me choose this button, that's button number 1, to release the parking brake. Now, I was also thinking about what if we add the brake after that. So let's use button number 2 to brake. You can see that the brake is kind of special because you've got the brake axis, but that would require us something like, likely I would say the rudders, or the pedals, sorry. Or we can use the left brake and right brake individually, or we could choose the brakes say together. I'm gonna select them both together because else we will lose too many buttons, and I think that's, I would say, doesn't make sense. But maybe you want to do it, feel free to do so. Now we configured the brakes and the parking brakes. Let's also look at some other things. For example, the flaps. Let's search for the flaps. Here we go, decrease and increase flaps. So what we're going to do is decrease, we will push the button down, which means button number 4, and increase, we push button number 2. Again, this completely depends on what you prefer. This is the way how I set it up, but you're completely free to adjust it if you want. Now we configured a lot of controls already. So let's remove this filter and let's see if there are some other things which we might want to adjust. For example, you can do the trim up and down. That could be analog buttons. For example, you can assign it to these buttons, which are below the, I would say below the flaps, right? That's, I think it's button number 6 and button number 7. But again, it depends on what you prefer. Trimming is always, I would say, scary because trimming can be very sensitive and could result in that the aircraft, I would say, oversteering. So watch out with this one. I've said it now like this, but again, it's up to you if you want to change it. I think that the trim up, trim down, that makes sense for me. If we scroll further down, we can see other things like toggle the spoilers, say rudder left, right, yaw. That's not what we really need in this aircraft. You can change the mixture. That's also not what we need, but we need to change the throttle. And if we change the throttle, we can see a long list. We can see throttle, decrease, increase. You can see reverse thrust, but that's not what we're searching for. We're searching for the axis. So what we can do here is search for throttle axis. And you will see it's not in the essential list for some reason. So then in case you need to switch to all, and that's where you see the throttle axis, and then I can move that nice slider which is on the joystick. If I press the option correctly, of course, scanning. And that's joystick slider X. So that will be the throttle. For all those controls, if you probably already saw it, in the left top of this video, you can see which buttons I have assigned because I highlighted them on the joystick. Now we did this, there are of course some other things. In the Cessna, it doesn't really make sense to do gear up, gear down, but for the A320, you might want to do it, and I will show it in a few seconds. I will show you how to create a different profile, in that case for the A320. So, what do we need to do next? I think changing the view, that's I would say something I do a lot. I'm not sure about you, but changing between the internal view and the external view, that might be very useful. So let's search for that one. If you search for view, you get a ton of entries. You can see all of them are digital, some of them are analog, some of them are axis, which is also interesting. And if we completely scroll down, you will find a nice option which is called Cockpit External View Mode. So what I'm going to do is I can assign it to that round button and then press the option which is button number 5. This allows me to quickly go inside the cockpit and outside the cockpit. But if we're in the cockpit, it might be pretty useful to also look left, right, up and down. Well, you can also do that, but then you need to scroll back a little bit to the top, because here we see a lot of views. You can see the cockpit views, you can see the quick left, quick right. Those are degrees, but you can also use these ones. Cockpit quick view up, rear, right and left. So let's assign them. So I need to make sure that I press the correct one. And I'm going to use that small, I would say, POV on top of the joystick to configure that. Right, I need to press the correct option and then left. So now we're good. So this is also being set. But what about if you also want to do the same thing outside of a cockpit? In that case, what we need to do is move down the list, and that's where you will find the external views. The external views, there are also tons of them, but what I found out is that these ones, right, the view right, left, and up, right, left, those might work. Also the downs work, but the quick views are working the best because they're mimicking the same views as inside the cockpit. So now if I do this, you can see that the number 1 is appearing here, which means that this button has been assigned already to something. In this case, using the external view and the cockpit view, it doesn't, let's say, hurt. But in some other cases it might hurt, so watch out. You can always press the gear option and then you will see to which other option it has been assigned already, and you can remove the control if you want. But for now we will leave it and let's configure the rest of the options. Right, and then of course the top. So that's been done. So perfectly fine. Now we can look multiple ways. So let's now test it because we changed a lot. So let's go inside the cockpit. That's the first thing we can do, but thinking about that, maybe we should first test the flaps. Right, test the flaps if they're working. Hard to see maybe. Well, maybe we should go first inside the cockpit. Here we are. Because now I can use those buttons. I can look right, left, up and back. That works pretty fine. But what if we want to test the parking brakes? Well, the parking brakes are located here, right? So we need to remove this one. So let's remove the parking brakes. And you can also see that that works. Removing the parking brakes. Braking also works. So I would say I'm pretty happy with this. The only thing which we need to do is test the trimming wheel. And to test the trimming wheel, we can go into this part and then we can say press the options if they're working. But maybe I configured it incorrectly because you do see that it doesn't work, I would say, as expected. But it could also be due to the fact that the aircraft has not started yet. So let me first do that. Let me make sure the parking brake is set, because else we're gonna move for, I would say, a little bit too fast. So we're good to go. So can we move the trim? No, that doesn't work. So that's something which we need to look at. But if we look at, for example, the flaps, which are over here, you can see that I will be able to move them. So this works. Flaps are working, but this part, right, the trim wheel doesn't work. Or maybe I assigned it to the incorrect entry. Could also be the case, right? Because there's so much entries that you might have selected the incorrect one just as I did. So let's see. So we're going to go back to the settings again, and then we're going to go to the controls, and inside the controls we're going to search for the trim wheel. So trim, And there you see a lot of things. So we set it, okay, elevator trim down, elevator trim up. Yeah, it looks correct to me, but maybe I'm incorrect or maybe I'm wrong. Well, same thing, right? Trim left and right is there, trim nose up and down. It looks like it should work. At least I would expect it to work. Let me see if we can find another option, because in some cases you might want to use a different one. For example, elevator trim wheel increase decrease. Let me try that one. Let's hit the button. Decrease. Here you can see the same thing, right? So this is a special one, right? What you now see is that it says, hey, I'm going to create a new profile called my new 172 Skyhawk profile. So for the specific aircraft, it's going to create a separate profile, which is different compared to the airplane's controls. You might like this, you might not like this, but this is the way that they decided it. And how can you figure it out? Let me press cancel, because here's that specific. If it says specific, then it will create a new profile here. If it says airplanes, it will create a profile here. So I'm still trying to figure out why this one doesn't work, because I would say I would love to use this functionality, to be honest. On my other joystick, the Velocity one, that one works perfect. So let me see if we can make it work. Elevator, aileron trim. Yeah, let me test it again. Oh, you need to press the right buttons. 6 and 7. Or maybe that's the case. Maybe I simply press the wrong buttons. would be smart, right? Yeah, you can see now it works. You can see it moves the needle up and down. So we're good to go. What are other interesting things? Well, of course, we can test the throttle. Well, you can see the throttle increases, decreases. So perfectly fine. If you think about the Cessna 172, there might be some other options which you might want to enable. For example, what you could do is assign those right buttons, of the joystick to be something with the autopilot. For example, activate the autopilot, enable the nav mode, enable the flight level change mode. Let's do that. So we're going to go back to the settings menu. And the first thing we're going to do is go to the controls, and inside the controls, we're going to search for autopilot. Autopilot, and then we need to have the master switch. The master switch is where you configure if the autopilot will be enabled, yes or no. You can see that the list is again pretty long, right? So you might need to search a bit until you found the option. So here you can see the toggle autopilot vs hold. You can see the arm auto throttle if you want to use auto throttle. And also autopilot on or off. I do think that we're coming, I would say, pretty close. So let me search further. I think it was autopilot master switch or something. Autopilot. Let me make the search a little bit more specific. And I also only want to configure it for all the airplanes, because that saves me a lot of configuration work, because else you would need to create a separate profile for each individual aircraft. I would say kind of stay away from that, but again, it's really up to you if you want to do that. Probably I overlooked the setting, so let me autopilot master. Here it is, master switch. And I'm gonna assign it to this nice button number 9. Button number 9 will be the autopilot master switch. Then the other one which I want to configure is of course the autopilot. So what do you do it? Flight level change. Yeah, toggle. I'm gonna use this button number 11, and then I want to use the autopilot. Maybe the nav mode. Make sense? Set autopilot nav select. Assign it to button number 8, and then the other one heading to button number 10. So this is all set. Think about that. We configured a lot of things already. What are other things which are very useful? In this case, for the Cessna, for general aviation aircraft, it might be, let's say, something also with the autopilot, but it also might be something completely different on what you want. But I want to continue with the autopilot because I think it makes sense. In this case, I can set the toggle altitude hold mode to button number 13. And then we also have the approach mode, which you might want to use. This is the back course, this altitude hold, autopilot approach. Here we go. And then press this button. And with that, I think we're almost done, right? We still have some buttons left, but for now, I think you've got a clear indication on how you can configure it for the Cessna 172. As promised, the next step is that we're gonna look at how you can configure it for the A320. And for those who watched my previous videos about the Thrustmaster 16000 mic, what I did is I created a special profile which exactly mimics that joystick, but then with the Ursa Minor. You can find it on my website, right? You can download it and then try it out yourself. But for now, let's continue with the Airbus. And now we're in the Airbus A320. We're gonna configure the joystick so it can be used in combination with this aircraft. So we're gonna go to the settings menu again, and then go to the controls, and then we select the joystick. You see that currently it's set to G8, which stands for the general aviation aircrafts, the general controls and the airplanes controls, as I've configured in the previous part of this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a duplicate of this one. And if we create a duplicate, we can specify a new name. So we can say Airliner, and then GC for general controls, and then hit OK. It will create a copy of the profile normally, but what I've seen if you're participating in sim update number 5 beta, it might not work 100% correctly, so be aware of that. Now for the airplanes controls, I'm going to create a completely blank profile because I want to start from scratch. Reason for that is because the Airbus has different controls which I want to use, not the same as the Cessna. If I go to the assigned, you will normally see that this one is being copied, but as I mentioned in sim update number 5 beta, it looks like there's an issue with this. So let's get started with the axis in this case again. So we're going to search for axis, and we're going to move this one to essential because then we see everything. So the rudder axis will be the Z axis, the aileron axis will be the X axis, and the elevator one will be the Y axis. So we're good to go. Right, now we can control the aircraft, we can move it from left to right, we can climb or descend, and we can use the rudder. But we also need to set the throttle. So I'm going to search for throttle. And in this case, what you will see is it contains these items, but it doesn't contain these axes again. So move it again to all, or move it to axis, which is also an option. And there you will find all the axes. But in this case, the aircraft has more engines, which means that you need to decide. You can individually control them, but what I would recommend you, if you only have a joystick like the Ursa Minor, then simply use that axis, that slider number X, and use that to control all the engines. That of course doesn't allow you to control those engines individually, but hey, is it a real issue? I don't think so. But with the Airbus, there is of course that special thing. Let me show you. If we go inside the aircraft, which we currently are, with this aircraft, you can also set it in reverse. And that's not only applicable to the A320, but also to other aircrafts. And what you will see is that, well, in this case, it doesn't work, right? Because you can't go into reverse mode. So what we need to do in this situation is we need to assign it reverse mode. Agree? Well, let's do that. So I'm going to go to the settings, and I go to the controls, and I will search for reverse. Because there's the hold throttle reverse thrust or toggle throttle reverse thrust. What's the difference? If you do the hold, then you need to continue to press that option or that button to make sure that you can reverse thrust. If you set toggle, it will activate it. And as soon as you want to go, I'd say the other direction again, you need to press the button again, which will make it go into the different direction. It's really up to you which one you want to assign. I would say throttle might be useful in some cases, but the toggle might also be very useful in some other cases. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to set the toggle, and I'm going to use that round button number 5, because I do think that it makes most sense. Besides that, we're going to configure the parking brake and the normal brake. We're going to configure them exactly the same as with the Cessna, right button number 1. And then we're going to search for brake. Where is the brake? Left and right, both brakes. And we're going to assign the flaps, because those are still important things which we need to configure. So flaps, you can see the flaps axis, but that's not what we want, because we want to decrease and increase the flaps. Decrease and increase the flaps. And you can see that that works perfectly. Retract and decrease or retract and extend the flaps. This simply puts the flaps into the most extreme situation. So it means, say, flaps maximum, and retract the flaps simply retracts them completely. So that's not what you want in most cases, because it will go from in the aircraft, in the Airbus, I think it's not sure what the maximum level is, but don't use that for now. In addition to that, what we can of course do is we can look at other things. But before doing that, let's first make sure that the reverse throttle works, because that's kind of important. So I'm going to go inside the cockpit, and then I'm gonna press that button, and if you see what happens now, you can see that these things are changing. So we'll go into reverse mode, and if I now throttle, I will go into reverse mode, unless I would say completely go to 0, and then I would say I need to press the button again, and then I can go to the front. So it's really what you want. This is one of the options. In addition to that, we can test the flaps, right? We can see they're moving. So also good. We can remove the parking brake. We need to watch out. Parking brake, that's good. And we can use the brakes, but then we likely need to apply some power to the aircraft because it's pressured, right? So let me also do that in a few seconds. Well, let's do it now. Let's do the quick key. Gonna press the Ctrl E. For those who don't know, Ctrl E simply starts the aircraft. Saves you a lot of time while recording a video. Besides that, we of course have this ground spoilers and the speed brake. We might want to do something with that, because that's what the I would say Cessna doesn't have, but this Airbus has. So let's have a look at that part. So we're going to go to the settings, and then we can go to the controls, and then select the Wing Control Ursa Minor joystick. What did I want to? I think it was the spoilers, right? What we did. And here you can see that the spoilers, you can set them to arm, you can toggle the spoilers, you can increment, decrement, retract. Here again, toggle the spoilers. So here you can say toggle the spoilers, and here you have the arm, the auto spoilers. Again, it really depends on what you prefer. So what I decided to do is I've decided to, let's say, automatically arm the spoilers, and I assigned this nice button number 13. Not the most, well, maybe I should do a different view. Maybe I should use this button number 12. That makes, or might make more sense. Besides that, we saw that speed brake. Speed brake. Is it speed space brake? Is it brake? Brake, yes, we have the brake, and then we need to search speed brake. This is the auto brake, that's not what we need. Or did they move it on the spoilers? This to arm the spoiler, or maybe it's increment, decrement spoilers. Let me try that. So I'm going to assign button number 13 and button number 14 to that. So let's see if that works now. We're going to go back to Flight Simulator and then test it. Always do recommend you to test it, because it sometimes doesn't work. As you already have seen in, well, we can move it, but it goes directly, right? It doesn't go into steps. So that's not what I like to do, because I likely want to change this a bit. Let me see if we can find another controller to move that one. So we're going to go to controls. Again, make sure that the joystick and then search for spoilers. And then we will find increment, decrement spoilers, which is kind of weird because I would expect that it would do it. But as you can see, it doesn't work perfectly with this analog button for some reason. Not sure why. Maybe it's due to the fact that they're analog, I'm not sure. But so if you are having the same issue, then it likely is due to the fact that they are analog, which means that you can turn them up and down, right? Not digital on or off. But in this case, it really doesn't work. So that's not very useful in our case, right? So let's remove them for now. So I'm gonna remove it, right? You can simply press the option and then remove the controller, or you can also do this, delete the assignment, same thing. So multiple ways to do that. So increment, decrement spoilers doesn't really work in this case. So that's a pity. So we still need to find another way to do that. And likely, I would say you might want to use well, maybe if you've got a different joystick, you can use kind of, I would say, a wheel or something, right? Which will change the spoiler. But with that said, what we do with the other buttons? Well, let's use the autopilot again. So I'm going to show you Autopilot Master. Here we go, Autopilot Master enabled. Then we're gonna do the flight level change. Use the other button. Then we're gonna use the, what should we do? Nav mode? Might make sense. Oh, let's search for Autopilot. And then we're going to search for the navigation mode, altitude hold. No, that's not what we want. We can use the, let me find it. Set the autopilot nav select. That's what you could do. Again, could. It's not needed, right? You can also do it differently. Autopilot, what shall we else do with it? Maybe the autopilot heading mode, heading hold. Yeah, that could be the other one. And again, these are examples, right? You can do it completely different. That's what I also would recommend you to do. Have a look at this, use it as your basic, and then adjust them to your needs, because it might still be that you want to change some different things. So let's have a look at what we configured currently. We can go to assigned, and then we should see most of the things if we would remove the filter. So these are the buttons which we currently assigned. So not all the buttons, so there's still some room for you to kind of customize this configuration. But the most important thing is that the general controls one is still empty because we didn't change the views. I'm going to quickly show it. I'm going to go a little bit faster compared with the Cessna, because if you want to have those details, you can also have a look at that one. But what we're going to do is we're going to assign a button which allows us to switch between internal and external. That will be button number 12. Well, in this case, button number 12. I already assigned it, so I made a mistake. So let me remove it. And then let's say that we're going to assign it to, in this case, the red button. Can I do that? I want to assign to the red button. Yeah, button number 22. That will be my external view. Or no, that does make sense. Let me change it to button number 20, which is the small joystick on top of the joystick, which is also known as, let's say, they call it the pulse, right? The pulse left, right, etc. Which are the ones which we're going to configure next. So we now can switch between external and internal. So now change the pulse, rear, right, top, and then of course left. These are the quick views, but you can also use the view lookup right. Those are not returning to the normal view, so be aware of that. They will allow you to look left and right, but then you need to assign, for example, the reset view to come to the normal state again. And for the cockpit, we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to search for the quick views, up, rear, and then we're going to assign right and left, and then we've got everything. At least I do think that we got everything. Are there more things which you can assign? Yes, of course, because if you look to the assigned options, you still see that if we remove the filter, There are still some buttons which are not assigned, but again, I leave those up to you so you can kind of customize it yourself. So with that, we can go to the aircraft and do some final checks. Because in this case, you can see that our, let's say, reset view would be really useful, right? I do think at least. So let me, let's say, change the view. So here we are. So we can look left, right, to the back and to the front, which is in this case, with the A320, you look at the, let's say, top of the cockpit. Still very useful. You can go to the outside and to the inside. And we can throttle, say decrease throttle. And we don't have that free view. That free view could be another thing which you assign, because keep in mind that you still have the buttons of the HUD on the top to move into different directions. But again, it's up to you how you want to do that. This is how you configure this part in Flight Simulator 2024. But for the A320 and also for the some other aircrafts, there's also that option to kind of make the joystick shake a bit. Let's see how we can do that. So I started the SimAppPro, and keep in mind that you don't need to start it, but you can simply right click and open it from the, say, from the taskbar. And that's where you can go to the dynamic vibration motor. In this case, what you can say or do or change is change the settings over here. I kept the default ones. I selected Flight Simulator 2024, and based on that you can select these aircrafts. These are pre-configured, and you simply configure them or click them and then launch the game. It's really important that you need to do it before launching the game, and then it works, which is kind of a pity, because if you want to change the aircraft while you're in the game, you need to exit the game and go inside the game again to make sure that they are working correctly. So be aware of that they might not work if you configure this while you're in the game. But still, it's a pretty nice feature, makes it more realistic. Now we configured everything, we can also say, hey, I want to create from game. Because I've got the key binding, I can press this option, which still has these configurations where this one is still running, but actually it's not running anymore because I completely, say, deleted everything because I didn't like it. So if I say create from game, you will have the option to say, hey, I want to create the GA config. And here you can see the different configurations. I can say, hey, I want to have the GA AC. And then I can say, okay, config for general aviation, aircraft controls, and I can say create, and it says, do you want to create a new file? I can press OK, and now it created a new file, as you can see, also with my username. And then it says here the description, it has 0 downloads. Well, fine for me. Then I can do another thing and say, hey, I've got the general aviation. Let's use this one. And then say GA, what is it? GC. And then I can say config for general aviation. Aircrafts. And then was the, what is it? How do we call it? There were aircraft controls and I think general controls. And then I can press create again and can say okay. Downside, I still think, is that these are two completely separate profiles. I can delete it if I want. I can share it. I can change the description from over here. I can rename it, which is super useful. But I think the downside of this is that you can only have one active. So I'm still kind of wondering / I'm still puzzled about how this could work, because I would like to have one package which I can apply to Flight Simulator, which applies then both the general controls as well as the airplane controls. And it looks like that's not possible, but maybe I've missed something. If I missed something, sorry for that. If you know how to do it, let me know, because I'm really curious about that. And with that, we're at the end of this video, where we looked at how to configure that nice joystick, the WINWING Ursa Minor 32. This is the left version, but you also can do the same thing with the right version. As mentioned, I have exported these profiles from Flight Simulator, and let me show you how to do that. As a bonus is if you go to Flight Simulator, if you go to the settings and to the controls, you can simply click that gear and then say export. That's the only thing which you need to do. It saves it to this folder by default, but you can save it to any folder because you can also change the output. It will create the XML. Simply press escape and then it says, okay, hey, it created a backup. And I can do the same thing for this. And those files, I will put a link in the description where you can download them so you can also try them out yourself so you don't have to start from scratch. Now we're really at the end. I hope you liked it. If you liked it or if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box below this video and hope to see you back next time.